On April 28, 2026, the Haulover Sandbar in Miami was experiencing a flood tide of 3.2 knots. The water temperature was 82 degrees. These are fixed variables. They are recorded in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration logs. At 5:35 p.m., a man named Desmond Cole was standing in 3 feet of that water. He was 51 years old. He spent his life calculating the buoyancy of sunken steel. He understood exactly how much pressure it takes to breach a hull. But that afternoon, the breach happened inside his own chest. The medical report from Jackson Memorial Hospital doesn't use poetic language. It records 42 minutes of asystole. In plain terms, his heart stopped. The blood sat still in his veins like stagnant bilge water. By every metric of modern medicine, the person known as Desmond Cole ceased to exist. But 9 days later, Desmond is sitting in his home in Miami, looking at those same logs. He isn't here to talk about a miracle. He's here because he spent a year, an entire year, watching the salvage of his own soul while his body was cold on a stretcher. He's a man who trusts what he can measure with a caliper. And right now, he's struggling with the fact that the most real thing he's ever seen is something he can't find on a sonar sweep. I'm looking at the weld on my father's old 1978 skiff. It's a messy bead of aluminum. I'm 6 years old again, and I can smell the burnt metal and the salt from the canal behind our house in Homestead. I can see the way the light catches the scale on a dead snapper in the bucket. I'm analyzing the structural integrity of that weld. I'm thinking, that's gonna fail. In 5 years, that's gonna crack right there under the transom. But I'm not 6. I'm dead, or I was. I know how this sounds. I'm the guy you call when a freighter hits a reef and starts taking on water. I don't deal in visions. I deal in displacement and tons per inch immersion. But there I was, suspended in this memory, looking at a weld from 45 years ago with more clarity than I have looking at my own hands right now. Wait, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. The chronology, it's like a broken chain. You try to pull one link, and the whole thing piles up on the deck. 9 days ago, April 28th, we were at the sandbar. My wife, Sarah, was laughing at something the dog did. The sun was hitting the water at that specific angle where everything looks like beaten copper. I remember a sharp metallic taste in the back of my throat. It tasted like a copper penny. Then, a sensation like a bulkhead collapsing in my chest. No pain, just a sudden loss of steerage. My legs didn't just give out. They felt like they had been deleted from the system. The last thing I saw was the surface of the water coming up to meet me. I remember thinking about the tide. I thought, if I go under now, the current is going to pull me toward the inlet. I was worried about the salvage of my own body before I even hit the sand. Then the lights went out, but they didn't stay out. 1 second I'm under 3 feet of salt water, and the next I'm standing on the sandbar watching a guy who looks a lot like me face down in the current. I saw Sarah scream. I heard it too, but not with my ears. It was like the sound arrived inside my skull. I saw the people jumping off their boats. I saw a guy in a red swimsuit start doing compressions. I could see the way his hands were positioned. I wanted to tell him he was too high on the sternum. He was going to break a rib. I felt level. That's the only word for it. No panic, no weight. For a guy who spends his life fighting gravity and water pressure, being weightless was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. It felt like I was a vessel that had lost its ballast. I was going to drift away, and there was nothing to tie off to. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a vapor. It was a hand. I could feel the calluses. I could feel the heat through my shirt, except I wasn't wearing a shirt. I turned around, expecting to see another boater. It was Jesus. I didn't fall to my knees. I didn't see a crown. He was wearing a work shirt, the kind I wear. Heavy cotton, rolled at the sleeves. His eyes, they were the color of the deep water, the stuff past the continental shelf where the blue gets so thick it looks black. He looked at me, and I felt like I was being scanned. Not by a machine, but by someone who knew every stress fracture in my life. Desmond, he said. His voice didn't echo. It was just there, solid, like a deck under my feet. The survey is starting, he told me. I didn't understand. I think I asked him out loud, if I was going to heaven. I wanted to know if the paperwork was in order. That's how my brain works. I wanted to see the manifest. He smiled, and it was the saddest thing I've ever seen. He told me that I'd lived my life looking at the surface of things. He said I'd spent 50 years measuring the outside of ships while the inside was rotting out. He said he was going to show me what happens in the first year after the engines stop. "You're in the first wave now, Desmond," he said, "the recognition." Desmond is describing what he calls the first wave, a period of recognition. In marine salvage, the first 48 hours after a wreck are critical. This is the initial survey. Divers go down to assess the damage. They don't try to move the ship yet. They just try to understand why it sank. Desmond's account mirrors a specific pattern found in thousands of near-death testimonies. The soul doesn't immediately depart for a distant shore. It lingers. It observes the wreckage. According to a 2001 study published in The Lancet by Dr. Pim van Lommel, patients frequently report seeing their own resuscitation with veridical perception, meaning they see details they couldn't possibly know, like the location of a misplaced medical instrument or the specific actions of a bystander. Desmond's focus on the broken rib and the sternum position isn't just a detail. It's the surveyor's mind refusing to let go of the physical world even as the spiritual one takes hold. Everything shifted. The beach was gone. The boats, Sarah's screaming. It all faded out like a radio station losing its signal. We were in a place that looked like a dry dock, but it went on forever. No walls, no ceiling, just these massive glowing supports holding up things. I realized they were people. Thousands of them. They weren't floating, they were resting. Jesus walked with me. He didn't rush. He moved like a man who has all the time in the world because he made time. He told me that this first quarter, this first 3 months after death, is about the soul realizing it's no longer in the water. Most people, he said, they spend the first month trying to get back into their bodies. They're like sailors trying to bail out a ship that's already at the bottom. I saw them. I saw people weeping, reaching out for their old lives. I saw a woman who was screaming about her bank account. She was trying to count money that wasn't there. Her hands were moving like she was shuffling papers, but there was nothing in them. Jesus stopped in front of her. He didn't look angry, he just looked tired. "She thinks she's still in the current," he told me. "She hasn't recognized that the vessel is a total loss. She's clinging to the rust." I asked him what happened to her. "Did she stay there?" "Until she lets go of the weight," he said. "The first year is a process of shedding. You can't float if you're holding on to the anchors of the world." Then he turned to me. He said, You, Desmond, you think your value is in what you built, in the houses you bought and the ships you saved. But those are just barnacles. We're going to see what's under the hull." Suddenly, I felt this. It wasn't a pain. It was a stripping. Imagine taking a high-pressure water jet to a hull that's been in the ocean for 30 years. All the growth, the gunk, the lies you tell yourself to get through the day, it started coming off. I saw my first marriage. I saw the day I walked out. I'd always told myself I did it because she was difficult. I'd built this whole narrative about being the victim. But in that dry dock, the paint came off. I saw the truth. I was bored. I was selfish. I wanted a newer model. It was brutal. I wanted to look away. But Jesus was standing there, his hand still on my shoulder. He wasn't judging me. He was just witnessing the truth with me. "This is the second month, Desmond," he said. "The recognition of the self. Most souls find this part the hardest. They realize they weren't the captains they thought they were. Desmond's professional background is surfacing here in a fascinating way. As a salvage surveyor, his job is to identify latent defects, hidden flaws in a ship that aren't visible to the naked eye. In this vision, he is experiencing a moral version of his own career. Psychologically, this is known as ego stripping. When the brain is deprived of external stimuli and social roles, the things that define us, like our jobs or our bank accounts, the internal narrative is all that remains. For someone like Desmond, who defines himself by his competence and his ability to save things, the realization that he is the one in need of salvage creates a massive cognitive fracture. He is trying to use his professional vocabulary to stay in control, but the vision is forcing him to admit that his vessel was structurally unsound from the start. I tried to argue. I actually tried to litigate my life with Jesus. I told him about the charities. I told him about the time I worked 36 hours straight to keep an oil tanker from leaking into the Keys. I was presenting my salvage record. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just let me talk. I went on, listing my accomplishments like I was applying for a contract. When I finally ran out of breath, or whatever it is you have there, he pointed to a soul nearby. It was a guy I used to work with, a deckhand named Carlos. He died 5 years ago in a freak crane accident. Carlos was a quiet guy, didn't have much, lived in a trailer in Florida City. In this place, Carlos was glowing. Not like a light bulb, but like a piece of steel that's been polished until it's a mirror. He was moving through the dry dock with this ease. He looked like he belonged there. Carlos never saved a tanker, Jesus said, but he forgave the man who operated the crane that killed him. Before his soul even left the deck, he'd already let go of the anchor of resentment. He didn't need a year to recognize the truth. He lived in it. I felt small. I've spent my life feeling like the biggest guy in the room because I could solve the problems nobody else could. But looking at Carlos, I realized I was heavy. I was carrying 50 years of pride like it was a lead keel. The third month is about the displacement, Jesus told me. A soul can only rise as high as the water it displaces. If you're full of yourself, there's no room for me. And if there's no room for me, you sink. He showed me a vision of my own heart. It didn't look like a muscle. It looked like a ballast tank. And it was full of black, oily sludge, bitterness toward my father, arrogance toward my crew, a total lack of actual love for anyone but myself. I looked at Jesus and I felt this cracking. I'm a total loss, aren't I? I asked. He didn't answer right away. He looked out over the dry dock at the millions of souls going through their own first year. Nothing is a total loss if the owner is willing to pay the price for the salvage, he said. I didn't get it. Not then. I thought he was talking about money. I'm an idiot. I was still thinking in terms of contracts. Then he leaned in close. I could smell the sea on him. Not the stinking, rotting sea of the harbor, but the clean, cold salt of the open ocean. We're moving to the interior now, Desmond, he said. The first 3 months are over. You know you're dead. You know you're flawed. Now we're going to look at the memories you've buried under the floorboards. The 3-month wave, Desmond describes, corresponds to a concept in clinical grief and NDE research called the period of acclimation. In the AWARE study, Awareness During Resuscitation, led by Dr. Sam Parnia of NYU Langone, researchers found that the life review often occurs in stages. It isn't a chaotic jumble, it's a structured reevaluation. While Desmond perceives this as months, time dilation is a common feature of these experiences. What feels like months to the consciousness can occur in the seconds it takes for a defibrillator to charge. The dry dock imagery is unique to Desmond's background, but the functional purpose, the stripping of the ego and the confrontation with one's own weight, is a universal theme. The soul is being prepared for what comes next, the deep-level inspection of every choice ever made. The dry dock started to change. The glowing supports began to blur. I felt a pull, like a current catching a boat that's drifted too far from the pier. I looked back at the guy on the sandbar. They were still working on him. I saw the paramedics arriving. I saw the blue lights of the boat. It felt like it was miles away now, like I was looking through the wrong end of a telescope. Is Sarah going to be okay? I asked. Jesus didn't look back. He kept walking into the blur. Her survey isn't for a long time, Desmond. Focus on your own. The next wave is the hardest. It's the remembrance, every word, every thought, every motive. We're going to see the ripple effect of every choice you ever made. I tried to stop. I didn't want to go. I realized that if the first 3 months were just about recognizing I was dead, the next 3 were going to be about why I lived. And for the first time in my life, I was terrified of the inspection. I'm a surveyor. I know what happens when you find a crack in the main beam. You don't just paint over it, you have to cut it out. I'm not ready, I said. Jesus stopped and looked at me. He didn't look like a boss anymore. He looked like a father. Nobody is ever ready for the truth, Desmond. That's why I'm here. I'm the only one who can carry the weight of it with you. And then the current took us. I keep trying to find the flaw in the math. I'm sitting here in my office in Miami 9 days after my heart stopped, and I'm looking at my textbook on fluid dynamics. I'm trying to convince myself that what I saw was just my brain misfiring, a surge of chemicals, a last gasp of a dying engine. That's what a rational man believes. But a rational man doesn't remember the smell of cedar from a closet he hasn't opened in 40 years. A rational man doesn't remember the exact temperature of the rain on a Tuesday in 1994. When that current took us, I thought we were moving through space. I was wrong. We were moving through time, but not like a movie. It was more like, imagine a ship that's been submerged for a century. You bring it up and you start scraping. You're looking for the original hull. You're looking for the moment the metal first started to fatigue. Jesus called this the remembrance. He said it usually takes up the second quarter of that first year after you die, months 4, 5, and 6. The physical body is gone, Desmond, he said. His voice was clearer now, like he was standing right in my ear. But the record of the vessel remains. Every vibration, every collision. We have to look at the stress risers. I saw my life laid out in plates of steel, millions of them. And Jesus started walking along the line, tapping them with his knuckles. He stopped at a plate from 3 years ago. I recognized it immediately. It was a contract dispute with a small-time boat owner in Key Largo. The guy's engine had seized, and I'd written a survey report that favored the insurance company because they were the ones who gave me most of my work. I'd used technical language to hide the truth. I'd buried the fact that the manufacturer was actually at fault. It was just business, I told Jesus. I felt that old defensiveness, that pressure in my neck. Everybody does it. It's a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. Jesus didn't look at me. He kept his hand on that plate of steel, and suddenly the plate turned transparent. I saw the boat owner, a guy named Miller. I saw him sitting at his kitchen table, head in his hands. I saw his wife crying in the bedroom because they couldn't afford the repairs. And without that boat, Miller couldn't run his charters. I saw the ripple effect. I saw their son having to drop out of community college. I saw the stress cracking their marriage, all because I'd tilted a report by 5 degrees to stay on the good side of a carrier. You see the electrolysis, Desmond? Jesus asked. I didn't understand. I told him that electrolysis is what happens when stray current eats away at a hull in salt water. Exactly, he said. You thought it was a small lie, but it was a stray current. It ate through someone else's life. And because you let it happen, it ate a hole in your own hull, too. You've been taking on water since that day, and you didn't even notice the bilge pumps were failing. Desmond is using the term electrolysis to describe the hidden damage of a moral choice. It's a perfect surveyor's metaphor. But the word Jesus uses later, salvage, has an even deeper history. The root of the word redemption comes from the Latin redemptio, which literally means a buying back. In the ancient maritime world, it referred to the price paid to recover a vessel captured by pirates or lost to the sea. It wasn't a religious term, it was a commercial one, a legal one. It implies that a debt is owed and a specific price must be paid to return the property to its rightful owner. When Desmond describes Jesus as the master surveyor who is buying back the vessel, he is unknowingly tapping into a linguistic truth that predates modern theology by 2,000 years. I wanted to move on. I wanted to show him the good plates, the times I'd been a hero, but he wouldn't let me. He said the remembrance isn't about the stuff that went right. It's about the corrosion we ignored. We spent what felt like weeks in month 5. Looking at the way I talked to Sarah, the times I'd used silence as a weapon, I saw the way my arrogance had acted like a solvent, slowly dissolving the trust in my crew. I saw a moment from 2012. I was at a bar in Coconut Grove. A guy was being bullied by some loud mouths, and I just sat there. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to breach my own peace, as I told myself at the time. Jesus tapped that plate. You were a bulkhead that day, Desmond. You were supposed to hold back the flood, but you stayed shut, and the water moved past you and hit someone who couldn't swim. I saw the guy get beaten. I saw the permanent damage to his eye. I saw his life change. I started to feel heavy. Not physically, I didn't have a body, but there was this displacement. I felt like I was sinking. The more truth I saw, the more I realized I wasn't seaworthy. I was a wreck. This is the reckoning, Jesus said as we hit month 6. Most souls get stuck here. They see the damage they've done, and they can't bear the weight of it. They want to go back to the dark where they can pretend the hull is still solid. I looked at the current around us. I saw other souls. They were weeping. Some were screaming, trying to claw their way back toward the surface, back toward the lies they told themselves on Earth. They were terrified of the light because the light showed every crack. Can't we just skip this? I asked. I was desperate. I get it. I'm a mess. I'm a failure. Jesus finally looked at me. He grabbed my arm, and for a second, the current stopped. You're not a failure, Desmond. You're a project. But I can't float a ship that refuses to admit it's at the bottom. This stage of Desmond's account, the process of the soul over a year, creates a sharp tension with the traditional view of an instantaneous heaven or hell. Many theological traditions suggest that the moment the heart stops, the destination is fixed. However, Desmond's experience of a gradual stripping mirrors the concept of purgation, not as a place of punishment, but as a necessary phase of truth-facing. The tension lies in the question, is salvation an event or is it a transformation? If Desmond is correct, the first year after death isn't a waiting room. It's an active, grueling reconstruction. This challenges the instant fix theology that many believers rely on, suggesting instead that the weight we carry out of this life must be dealt with plate by plate before we can enter a higher state of being. Then came the third quarter, months 7, 8, and 9. The wave of decision. The current changed. It wasn't pulling us anymore, it was pushing. It felt like we were in a pressure test, like we were at 400 feet, and the hull was starting to moan. Jesus told me that this is where the choice is made. In the first 6 months, you see the truth, he said. In the next 3, you decide if you want to be clean. Some people love their rust more than they love the light. They've spent so long defining themselves by their bitterness and their pain that they don't know who they are without it. I saw a woman. She was holding onto a massive, jagged piece of metal. It looked like part of a bridge. She was hugging it so tight her hands were bleeding, or whatever the equivalent is there. That's her anger toward her father, Jesus whispered. He's been dead for 30 years, but she won't let go. If she lets go, she thinks she's letting him win. So she stays here at the bottom, holding onto the wreck. Just tell her to drop it, I shouted. She can't hear me, Jesus said. She's made herself deaf with her own screaming. She has to choose to look up. I realized then that I was holding on to something too. It was my father, the guy who built that skiff with the messy welds, the guy who never told me I was good enough, even when I was the top surveyor in the state. I'd spent 50 years trying to outrun his ghost. I'd built my whole career, my whole personality, as a giant screw you to a man who'd been in a grave since 2005. That was my ballast. That was the oily sludge in my tanks. If you keep that, Desmond, Jesus said, you can't move to the preparation phase. You'll be too heavy. You'll stay in the pressure. I tried to let go. I really did. I tried to mentally delete the resentment. It didn't work. It was bolted to my ribs. I can't, I said. It's part of the structure. If I take that out, the whole ship falls apart. Let it fall apart, Jesus said. I'm not here to patch a ghost. I'm here to build something new. I remember the feeling of the bolts shearing. It sounded like a freight train crashing. I had to admit, out loud, that I was just as flawed as my father was. I had to admit that my pride was just a different kind of messy weld. The moment I said it, the moment I stopped trying to be the superior vessel, the pressure changed. The current started to lift us. Desmond's description of shearing bolts and structural collapse during a moment of internal surrender finds an eerie parallel in the 1983 sinking of the SS Marine Electric. The ship was a converted World War II tanker that had been patched and overstressed for decades. When it finally went down off the coast of Virginia, the subsequent investigation changed maritime law forever. The inspectors found that the ship hadn't failed because of one big wave. It failed because of cumulative neglect. Small cracks that had been painted over for years finally gave way all at once under pressure. Desmond is describing a spiritual version of this maritime disaster. He is realizing that his hull didn't fail because of a heart attack. It failed because he had spent decades painting over the cumulative neglect of his own soul. We were rising. The water, if that's what it was getting lighter. The blackness of the deep was turning into that copper orange I saw at the sandbar, but it wasn't the sun. It was something else. "The purification is almost done," Jesus told me. "You've survived the pressure test. Now we have to get you ready for the Father's house. The last 3 months are about the preparation. You have to learn how to breathe in the light." I felt lighter than I'd ever been, but I was also terrified because I knew that once we got to the end of the year, there was no going back. The survey would be final. I looked at Jesus. "Is it gonna hurt? The end?" He didn't answer. He just pointed up. "Look at the displacement, Desmond. Look at how much room you're making for the truth." I looked up and I saw the surface, but it wasn't water. It was a threshold. And then I heard it. The sound of a heart monitor beeping. It was like a hammer hitting a bell. It was the most violent, intrusive sound I'd ever heard. "No," I said. "Not yet. I haven't finished the year. I'm only at month 9. I'm not ready." Jesus smiled, but this time it wasn't sad. It was knowing. "You're going back to finish the survey in the water, Curse Desmond. Tell them what happens to the steel when the light hits it." The current didn't lift me anymore. It slammed me downward. I'm looking at a rusted 6-inch galvanized bolt on my desk right now. It came off a scow in the Miami River back in 19. The zinc is gone. The threads are chewed to nothing by salt and time. I keep it there to remind myself that everything eventually returns to its basic elements. The doctors say what happened to me was a hypoxic event. They say when the brain is starved of oxygen, it creates a narrative to fill the silence. It's a survival mechanism. That's what I tell people when I'm at the marina. I tell them it was the chemicals. I tell them I was just a computer with a short circuit. But then I remember the 10th month. We were out of current. We were in a space that felt like the moment right before a ship is launched. That second when the blocks are knocked away and the vessel is just starting to slide down the ways. It's a moment of absolute, terrifying stillness. Jesus was still there, but he looked different. The work shirt, it didn't look like cotton anymore. It looked like it was made of the same light that was filling the room. "The preparation is the final quarter, Desmond," he said. "This is months 10, 11, and 12. This is where the soul learns to hold its own weight in the presence of the Father." I saw souls that were being fitted. That's the only word for it. They weren't being given wings or harps. They were being calibrated. I saw a man who had spent his whole life as a mechanic. He was standing in this light and he looked like he was being forged. The rough edges of his temper, the grease of his old life, it was all gone. He looked like a perfectly machined part. "He's seaworthy?" Jesus said, "He spent the last 9 months admitting where the hull was weak. Now he's being reinforced." But then I saw the others, the ones who didn't make it to the preparation phase. In the official Jackson Memorial Hospital Code Blue record for April 28, 2026, the attending physician noted a persistent lack of pupillary response at the 30-minute mark. According to the document, the medical team had already begun discussing the cessation of efforts. The log shows 3 separate doses of epinephrine and 4 shocks from the defibrillator. The document number is JMH0428-CC. What the record cannot account for is a specific notation made by a nursing student, Maria V., in the margin of the telemetry strip. She wrote, "Patient's skin temp rising despite lack of pulse." In a clinical setting, a body with no circulation cools at a predictable rate. Desmond's body was doing the opposite. It was heating up from the inside out, as if the fittings he describes were generating a physical thermal load that modern medicine cannot calculate. I asked Jesus about the ones who weren't in the light, the ones who were still back in the pressure of the 9-month current. He didn't look away. He looked directly into the dark. "The separation isn't a wall, Desmond. It's a matter of displacement. If a soul chooses to stay heavy, if it refuses to let go of the rust, it can't rise. It's not that they aren't allowed here, it's that they can't exist here. The light would crush them because they have no interior strength to meet it." I saw a guy I recognized, a developer I'd done some surveys for 10 years ago. He was a shark. He'd built an empire on corner cutting and intimidation. In that 11th month, he was still trying to negotiate. I could hear him. He was offering Jesus assets. He was trying to buy his way into the preparation phase. He's still trying to use the old currency, Jesus said. He spent 70 years building a vessel that only knows how to sink. Now he's getting exactly what he wanted. total separation from the light he hated his whole life. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't a pit. It was just a total absence of anything. Like being at the bottom of the Mariana Trench with no lights. Forever. I felt a chill that went straight through whatever I was made of. Am I ready? I asked. It's the 12th month. Is the survey done? Jesus turned to me. He held out his hands. I could see the scars. They didn't look like wounds. They looked like the only solid things in a world made of light. The survey is never done while the vessel is still in the water, Desmond. The straw, you've seen the year that follows the breach. You know the truth of the salvage. But your hull still has air in it. What does that mean? It means you're going back to the sandbar. You're going back to the heat and the salt and the broken ribs. I looked at the light behind him. I wanted to stay. For the first time, I didn't care about the salvage contracts or the house in Miami. I just wanted to be a part of that machined, perfect stillness. Why? I asked. Because there are too many people in Miami who think they can paint over the rust, he said. They think the survey doesn't matter until the ship hits the bottom. Tell them the pressure starts the moment the engines stop. The tension in Desmond's account isn't just theological. It hits a nerve in our current culture of deferred maintenance. We live in a world where we believe we can ignore the structural flaws in our systems, our environment, our ethics, our families, as long as the vessel is still moving. Desmond's vision suggests that the first year after death is essentially a grand audit of that neglect. According to a 2025 survey by the Global Ethics Institute, nearly 60% of professionals admit to minor ethical compromises to maintain their social standing. In Desmond's vocabulary, these aren't minor. They are stray currents eating the hull. If his account is true, the stakes of our daily, seemingly small choices are not just social, they are structural for the soul. Then came the impact. I've been in a boat crash. I know what it feels like when fiberglass hits a concrete pier at 40 knots. It's not a sound, it's a vibration that moves through your teeth. The return to my body was exactly like that. 1 second, I'm looking at the light of the 12th month, and the next, I'm being slammed into a cage of bone and meat. I felt the cold water of the sandbar. Then I felt the fire in my chest. That was the guy in the red swimsuit breaking my ribs with the compressions. I heard a sound like a wet rag being slapped against a table. Thwack! That was the defibrillator. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't in a dry dock. I was on the deck of a Miami-Dade fire rescue boat. The sun was gone. It was dark. The blue lights were spinning, reflecting off the salt spray. "We got a rhythm," someone shouted. I tried to speak. I wanted to tell them about the 8th month. I wanted to tell them about the developer in the dark. But all that came out was a mouthful of salt water and bile. I saw Sarah. She was huddled in the corner of the boat, wrapped in a yellow emergency blanket. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 40 minutes. They rushed me to Jackson Memorial. I spent 6 days in the cardiac unit. The doctors kept calling me a statistical outlier. They checked my brain for damage. They ran the scans. They couldn't find a single stress riser in my neurology. I should have been a vegetable. Instead, I was asking for a glass of water and my cell phone. But I'm not the same man who went into the water on April 28th. I'm sitting here now, and I'm looking at my schedule for next week. I have a survey on a 100-foot yacht in Fort Lauderdale. The owner wants me to look the other way on some hull thinning near the engine mounts. He offered me an extra $5,000 to sign off. A month ago, I would have done it. I would have used the language of acceptable tolerances. I looked at the phone. I looked at that rusted bolt on my desk. I told him no. I told him the rust doesn't care about his $5,000. I told him the water is coming for that ship whether I sign the paper or not. There is a specific kind of silence in Desmond's voice when he talks about the 12th month, the part he didn't get to finish. He describes the preparation as a calibration, a narrowing of the soul into something that can withstand the weight of absolute truth. But notice what he leaves out. He doesn't describe the Father. He doesn't describe the destination beyond the threshold. That absence is perhaps the most credible part of his testimony. A man who spends his life measuring things knows when he's encountered something that exceeds his equipment. He has stopped trying to put a caliper on the afterlife. He is simply sitting with the weight of the preliminary survey, waiting for the final one to begin. The humidity is thick today. I can feel the salt in the air, even with the AC running. It's that heavy Miami heat that makes everything feel like it's slowly dissolving. I pick up the bolt. It's rough. It leaves an orange smudge of oxide on my thumb. I've been thinking about the float test Jesus mentioned, about how much room a soul has to make for the truth. I used to think my life was a solid thing, a hull I'd built out of hard work and business sense. I thought I was the one doing the measuring, but I keep looking at the threads on this bolt. I keep thinking about how easy it is for a stray current to eat through the strongest steel if you aren't watching the gauges. I'm just sitting here in the quiet. I'm feeling the air move in my lungs, each breath a little bit of displacement I didn't earn. I'm just looking at the rust on my thumb. I'm waiting for the next tide to come in. Desmond Cole's medical file at Jackson Memorial ends with a discharge summary dated May 4th, 2026. It lists his recovery as unexplained but complete. There is one physical detail in that file that stands out, a notation by the respiratory therapist. It says that for the first 48 hours after he woke up, Desmond's exhaled breath had a distinct scent. Not of medicine, not of the hospital. It smelled like ozone and open ocean. It was a scent that didn't belong in a sterile cardiac unit in the middle of Miami. This account creates a specific tension for anyone who believes that our moral choices are private, that a rounding error in a report or a silent resentment toward a parent is a closed system. Desmond's year in the dry dock suggests that there are no closed systems. Every choice is a weld. Every lie is a stress riser. And the pressure of the deep is a very real thing for a soul that has forgotten how to be buoyant. The last thing Desmond did before he left the hospital was ask for a pen. He didn't write a will. He didn't write a letter to his lawyer. He drew a single perfect circle on the back of his discharge papers. And inside that circle, he wrote one word: buoyancy. He keeps those papers in the top drawer of his desk, right next to a rusted 6-inch galvanized bolt.